She had everything until the moment she had nothing. Isabella Hart built an empire from code and ambition, commanded boardrooms across 3 continents, and wielded power that made competitors tremble. Then one frozen Chicago night, it all vanished, stolen by the very people she trusted most. Locked out of her building, her accounts frozen, her reputation in ruins, she stood on that bitter sidewalk with nowhere to go. What happened next would change 2 lives forever. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this journey travels. The wind off Lake Michigan didn't just blow, it attacked. It came in vicious gusts that turned the streets of Chicago into wind tunnels, rattling windows and stripping the warmth from anything foolish enough to be outside. The temperature had dropped to 14 degrees, and with the wind chill, it felt closer to 0. The kind of cold that made your lungs ache, that turned exposed skin red in minutes. Ethan Cole moved quickly through it, his worn canvas jacket doing almost nothing against the assault. His shift at the Bridgeport Distribution Center had run late, again, and now he was behind schedule. Lily would be waiting. She was always waiting, pressed against the window of Mrs. Chen's apartment, watching for him. The image of her small face, those serious brown eyes tracking every car that passed, pushed him forward even as the wind tried to shove him back. He'd worked the warehouse floor for 6 years now. Not the job he'd imagined at 28, fresh off his associate degree in logistics, full of plans. But then Sarah got sick. Then Lily was born. Then Sarah was gone, and plans stopped mattering. What mattered was the paycheck that came every 2 weeks, the health insurance that barely covered Lily's checkups, and getting home before his daughter started thinking maybe this time Dad wasn't coming back. The corporate towers of the Loop rose ahead, their windows blazing with light. Ethan kept his head down, taking his usual shortcut through the plaza between Harrison and Congress. During the day, this space bustled with office workers grabbing expensive salads, but at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday in January, it was deserted. Smart people were home. Smart people weren't cutting through open plazas in weather that could kill you. He was halfway across when he saw her. At first, he thought it was trash. Dark shapes scattered across the concrete caught against the base of the fountain. But then one of the shapes moved, and Ethan realized it was a person, a woman, kneeling on the frozen ground, trying to gather papers. Her hands shook so badly she kept dropping them. The wind would snatch them up, scatter them, and she'd crawl after them like it mattered, like those fluttering pieces of paper were the most important thing in the world. Ethan slowed, then stopped. She wasn't dressed for this weather. He could see that even from 20 feet away. She wore what looked like an expensive suit, navy blue, tailored, but no coat, no hat, no gloves. Her dark hair whipped around her face as she reached for another paper, missed it, reached again. "Not your problem," a voice in his head said. The same voice that had kept him safe, kept him employed, kept him and Lily afloat in a city that would swallow you whole if you let it. "Keep walking. You're already late." But his feet weren't listening. "Hey!" His voice came out rough, barely audible over the wind. "Hey, are you okay?" She didn't look up. Her fingers closed around a paper and she pulled it against her chest like it might escape. Her shoulders were shaking, whether from cold or something else Ethan couldn't tell. He moved closer. "Ma'am, you need help?" This time she looked up and Ethan felt something twist in his chest. Her face was striking even in distress. Sharp cheekbones, intelligent eyes, the kind of face you'd see in a magazine. But those eyes were red-rimmed and her carefully applied makeup had smeared down her cheeks. She stared at him without recognition, without really seeing him at all. "The files," she said. Her voice was hoarse. "I need the files. They're evidence. I need—" She reached for another paper, but her hand was shaking so badly she knocked it further away instead. Ethan crouched down, ignoring the way the frozen concrete bit through his jeans. He grabbed the paper she'd been reaching for, some kind of financial statement, the numbers meaningless to him, and held it out. "Here." She took it with both hands, added it to the collection pressed against her chest. Up close, he could see she was shivering violently. Her lips had a bluish tint. How long had she been out here? "Where's your coat?" he asked. "Inside." She gestured vaguely at the tower behind her, all glass and steel, 60 stories of corporate intimidation. "Everything's inside. They locked me out." Her laugh was bitter, broken. "Changed the codes. My own building. Change the fucking codes. Ethan looked at the building, then back at her. A security guard was visible through the lobby doors, sitting at a desk, deliberately not looking in their direction. Okay. Ethan unzipped his jacket. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. Here, put this on. I don't need... You're going to freeze to death. He held it out. Put it on. For a long moment, she just stared at the jacket like she'd never seen one before. Then slowly, she released her death grip on the papers long enough to let him drape it over her shoulders. It was too big, hung awkwardly on her frame, and was still warm from his body heat. She pulled it tight around herself with a sound that might have been a sob. What's your name? Ethan asked. Isabella. The word came out barely above a whisper. Isabella Hart. The name meant nothing to him. Should it? She said it like it should matter, like it was supposed to mean something. I'm Ethan. He started gathering the scattered papers, moving systematically even as the wind tried to steal them. Financial reports, legal documents, emails. None of it made much sense to him, but clearly it meant everything to her. What happened? Coup. Isabella laughed again, that same broken sound. Corporate fucking coup. Marcus Delacroix. I hired him, mentored him, and he took it, took everything. The board voted this afternoon, emergency session, said I was unstable, mismanaging funds, creating a hostile work environment. She was talking faster now, words tumbling over each other. 30 minutes to clear my office, except they didn't even give me that. Security escorted me to the lobby, and then the locks changed. My key card doesn't work. My personal accounts are frozen. They're calling it asset preservation pending investigation. My phone, they shut off my company phone. I can't even call my lawyer because all my contacts were synced to the company system, and I can't remember his personal number because who memorizes numbers anymore? Ethan had managed to collect most of the papers. He tapped them into a rough stack, handed them to her. You got anywhere to go? I had everywhere to go. Her voice cracked. I had a penthouse in Lincoln Park, paid cash, but my personal accounts are frozen too. They moved fast, got a judge to sign off on it before I even knew what was happening. I can't access my money, can't get into my apartment because the doorman has instructions. I called, used some stranger's phone, and they said, Miss, Hart is not to be admitted pending the resolution of legal matters. She looked down at the papers in her arms. I built that company, 12 years of my life, and in one afternoon, they erased me. The wind gusted hard enough to make them both stagger. Isabella's teeth were chattering now, the shivering so violent Ethan could hear her joints rattling. You can't stay out here, he said. Where exactly do you suggest I go? The bitterness in her voice was thick enough to taste. Hotels want credit cards. Credit cards are frozen. I have $43 in cash in my wallet. That's what I had on me when they walked me out. And nowhere to go. Ethan stood there in the freezing wind, this stranger's papers in his hands, and felt that moment stretching out. He thought about Lily, waiting at Mrs. Chen's, thought about the grocery money he'd set aside, the rent due next week, the careful balance he'd maintained for years, thought about all the reasons this was a terrible idea. Then he thought about the look in Isabella Hart's eyes, that particular kind of loss that came from having everything torn away all at once. He'd seen that look before. In the mirror. 3 years ago, standing in a hospital room holding Lily's hand while the machines around Sarah's bed went quiet. I got a place, he heard himself say. It's not much, but it's warm, and you won't freeze to death. Isabella looked at him like he'd spoken in a foreign language. What? My apartment. It's about a mile from here, 20-minute walk, maybe less if we move. He checked his phone, 11:37 p.m. Mrs. Chen would be asleep by now, Lily curled up on her couch watching cartoons on low volume. You can stay there tonight. Figure out your next move when you're not hypothermic. I can't. She shook her head, but there was something desperate in her eyes now, a drowning person seeing a rope. I don't even know you. Yeah, and I don't know you, but I know you're about 20 minutes from serious trouble out here, and I'm not going to walk away and read about someone freezing to death in tomorrow's Tribune because I couldn't be bothered. He started walking. Come on, we're both going to freeze if we stand here arguing about it. For a moment, he thought she wouldn't follow. Then he heard footsteps behind him, quick and unsteady, and Isabella Hart fell into step beside him. They didn't talk as they walked. The wind made conversation impossible anyway. Ethan led them out of the loop through streets that got progressively less polished, less corporate. The buildings shrank from towers to mid-rises to walk-ups. The lighting got dimmer. The sidewalks got rougher. Isabella stumbled twice. Those expensive heels were useless on ice. And the second time Ethan caught her elbow, steadied her. She didn't pull away, just nodded once and kept walking. He could feel her shivering even through his jacket. They finally turned onto Ethan's street, a narrow stretch of brick 3 flats with metal porches and security doors that barely latched. His building was third from the corner, painted a faded red that might have been cheerful once. The stairs creaked under their weight as they climbed to the second floor. "This is it," Ethan said, unlocking the door. "Like I said, it's not much." The apartment opened directly into a living room that doubled as dining room. A couch that had seen better days faced a TV on a cheap stand. A small table with 2 mismatched chairs sat by the window. The walls were bare except for a few of Lily's drawings taped up with painter's tape. Bright splashes of color, stick figures holding hands. Everything was clean but worn, the kind of place where people lived carefully because replacing anything would be a crisis. The heat hit them like a wall. Ethan kept the thermostat at 68, higher than he could really afford, but Lily got cold easy. Isabella made a sound low in her throat and just stood there, swaying slightly. "Sit," Ethan said, guiding her to the couch. "I'll make coffee." "You drink coffee?" "Yes." She sank onto the cushion, still clutching her papers. "Thank you. Thank you." He left her there and moved to the kitchen, really just a corner of the room with a narrow counter and ancient appliances. As he filled the coffee maker, he called Mrs. Chen. She answered on the 3rd ring, sounding sleepy. "Ethan, you okay?" "Yeah, sorry to call so late. I'm home now. Is Lily asleep?" "Out like a light. Been asleep since 9:30. You want me to wake her, bring her over?" "No, let her sleep. I'll come get her in the morning before school." "Thanks, Mrs. Chen." "I owe you." "You don't owe me nothing. That girl's an angel. See you tomorrow." He hung up and turned to find Isabella watching him from the couch. She'd finally set the papers down beside her, but her hands were still shaking. "Your daughter?" she asked. "Yeah, Lily. She's 6. The coffee maker gurgled, filling the apartment with that familiar smell. "She stays with my neighbor when I work late." "You work nights?" "Afternoons into evening, usually. Today ran long." He pulled 2 mugs from the cabinet. One said, "World's OK's Dad," in fading letters. The other advertised a restaurant that had closed years ago. "Distribution center over in Bridgeport. Warehouse work." Something flickered across Isabella's face. Recognition, maybe, or classification. He was used to it. The way people heard warehouse worker and made instant calculations about who he was, what he was worth. The coffee finished brewing. Ethan poured 2 mugs, added sugar to both, he didn't have cream, and brought them over. Isabella took hers with both hands, wrapped her fingers around it like she was trying to absorb the heat through her palms. They sat in silence for a moment, drinking coffee in a stranger's living room while the radiator clanked and hissed in the corner. Ethan studied her in the lamplight. Now that she was warming up, the shock was fading, replaced by something harder. Anger, maybe. Or determination. "Tell me what happened," he said. "The whole thing." Isabella took a long drink of coffee, grimaced at the temperature or the taste, probably both, and set the mug down with careful precision. "I founded Vanguard Tech Solutions 12 years ago," she said. "I was 26, fresh out of Stanford with a master's in computer science and ideas that everyone said were too ambitious. I built predictive analytics software from scratch, something that could process massive data sets and identify patterns that humans missed. Started in my apartment with 2 other developers. Within 5 years, we had contracts with Fortune 500 companies. Within 10, we were valued at $1.2 billion. Ethan let out a low whistle. Billion with a B. Billion with a B. Her smile was bitter. I was the youngest female tech CEO in Chicago. Forbes featured me. TechCrunch called me the future of enterprise software, and I believed it. I believed every word. She picked up her coffee again, held it without drinking. Marcus Delacroix came on board 3 years ago. CFO position. He had credentials from everywhere: Harvard MBA, previous positions at Microsoft and Google, recommendation letters that read like poetry. I was so focused on product development that I thought I needed someone to handle the business side, someone with that traditional corporate background. Let me guess, Ethan said. He handled it. He handled it beautifully, reorganized our financial structure, brought in new investors, expanded our board. I was grateful. I thought he was making us stronger. She laughed, sharp and painful. I thought I'd found a partner who understood my vision. When did it go wrong? I don't know. Isabella's hands tightened around the mug. That's what makes it worse. I don't know when it started. Was it always the plan? Did he come to my company specifically to take it over, or did the opportunity just present itself and he took it? She looked at Ethan, and her eyes were hard. 6 months ago, I started noticing irregularities. Small things. Expense reports that didn't quite add up. Contracts with vendors I didn't recognize. I asked questions and Marcus had answers for everything. Smooth answers, reasonable answers. But you didn't believe them. I wanted to believe them. That's different. She set down the coffee, picked up one of the papers from her stack. So I started my own investigation. Quiet. Just me and one accountant I trusted. And we found it. A network of shell companies, fake contracts, money being siphoned out of Vanguard in amounts small enough that they disappeared in the quarterly reports, but large enough that over 3 years Marcus had stolen approximately $40 million. Ethan choked on his coffee. 40 million? Give or take. The full audit would take months. But I had enough to prove it, enough to bury him. Her smile was savage. I called an emergency board meeting for today, planned to present my evidence, demand his immediate termination, and turn everything over to federal prosecutors. I had it all organized. Documents, testimonies, forensic accounting. I was so fucking sure. What happened? He beat me to it. Isabella's voice went flat. The emergency board meeting happened, but I wasn't the one who called it. Marcus did. He presented his own evidence. Fabricated, but polished and professional. Claimed I was the one embezzling funds. That I'd become erratic, paranoid, was making wild accusations against senior staff. He had emails I never sent, transaction records I never authorized, even a psychiatric evaluation suggesting I was having a breakdown. Jesus. Well, 3 board members spoke in his defense. Board members he'd brought in himself over the past year. The vote was 7-3 to remove me immediately. My assistant, who I'd employed for 8 years, escorted me to my office under security supervision. I had 30 minutes to pack personal items. No electronics, no files, nothing from company servers, just photos and coffee mugs. She gestured at the papers scattered beside her. I grabbed what I could when they weren't looking, stuffed it in my jacket, my pockets, anywhere. The security guard saw me taking papers and tried to confiscate them, and She trailed off, shook her head. I made a scene, screaming, crying. Security had to physically remove me from the building, which of course just made me look exactly as unstable as Marcus claimed. But you have evidence, Ethan said. The investigation you did. The accountant. The accountant is gone. Left the company 2 weeks ago, voluntarily, according to HR. But I'd bet money Marcus got to him. And my evidence was on my company laptop, my work phone, our shared servers, all of which I no longer have access to. She picked up the papers again. This is what I managed to save. Fragments. Pieces of a puzzle that I can't prove fit together anymore. The radiator hissed and clanked. Outside, a car alarm went off, wailed for 30 seconds, then cut off abruptly. So what's your plan? Ethan asked. Isabella looked at him like she'd forgotten he was there. Plan? Yeah. You're not the type to just give up. Even I can tell that, and I met you 20 minutes ago. He leaned back against the couch, studied her face. You got a lawyer? Someone you can trust? I did have a lawyer, one of the best corporate attorneys in Chicago. But he was on retainer to Vanguard, and his loyalty is to whoever's signing his checks now. She rubbed her eyes, smearing the last of her makeup. I need a new lawyer, someone Marcus hasn't gotten to, but I can't access my accounts to pay anyone, and most attorneys want a retainer before they'll even look at a case. What about friends? Family? No family. My parents died in a car accident when I was in college. No siblings. Her voice was matter-of-fact, but Ethan heard the edge underneath. And friends. I had associates, colleagues, people I networked with. But when you're the CEO, relationships get complicated. Everyone wants something, and now that I'm not the CEO anymore, now that I'm the unstable ex-CEO who got removed by her own board, she shrugged. I've already gotten texts, apologies, concern, distance. No one wants to be associated with failure. Ethan thought about that, about building a life where success was so high and isolated that when you fell, there was no one to catch you. It made his own small life, his crappy apartment, his warehouse job, his TV dinners and late rent payments, seem almost rich by comparison. At least when things got bad, Mrs. Chen brought over soup. At least people asked how Lily was doing. You should eat something, he said. When's the last time you ate? Isabella frowned. Breakfast? Maybe? I don't remember. He stood, moved to the kitchen. The refrigerator yielded leftover pasta from 2 nights ago and some slightly wilted salad. He nuked the pasta, dumped it on a plate, brought it over with a fork. It's not fancy, he said. Isabella took the plate with an expression he couldn't quite read. She stared at the pasta like she'd never seen food before. Then, slowly, she took a bite, and another, and another. Within 3 minutes, the plate was empty. Thank you, she said quietly. I didn't realize. I think I forgot what hungry felt like. You can take my bed tonight, Ethan said. It's clean. I'll crash on the couch. I can't. Yes, you can. You're dead on your feet, and arguing about it is just wasting time we both need for sleeping. He stood, grabbed a pillow and blanket from the closet. Bathroom's down the hall. There's a spare toothbrush under the sink. I'll set an alarm for 6:30. I need to get Lily before school. Isabella stood slowly, still clutching her papers. She looked around the small apartment at the stick figure drawings on the wall and the dishes drying in the rack and the Afghan draped over the couch that was probably older than both of them. When she looked back at Ethan, her eyes were wet. Why are you doing this? She asked. You don't know me. I could be anyone. Ethan thought about that, about cold nights and loss, and the moment when everything you thought was solid just disappears. About standing in a hospital room, holding his daughter, having no idea how he was going to survive the next day, much less the next year. Someone helped me once, he said finally, when I needed it. Didn't ask questions, just helped. Figured maybe it's my turn to pass that on. Isabella nodded slowly. She opened her mouth like she might say something else, then closed it. Instead, she just said, Thank you, Ethan. Get some sleep, he said. Tomorrow you can figure out what happens next. She disappeared down the short hallway to his bedroom, barely big enough for a bed and a dresser, but it was private and warm. Ethan heard the door close softly, then the sound of running water from the bathroom. He made up his bed on the couch, killing time by checking his phone. 3 texts from work about tomorrow's shift schedule. A reminder that Lily's permission slip for the field trip was due Friday. Nothing from anyone asking where he was, if he was okay. His life was small enough that disappearing for a few hours barely registered. He thought about the woman sleeping in his bed. Isabella Hart, former CEO, current fugitive from her own life. He'd Googled her while the coffee was brewing, found dozens of articles, photos from conferences where she smiled with that particular professional confidence, quotes about innovation and disruption. All of it felt impossibly distant from the shaking, broken woman who'd been kneeling in the snow collecting scattered papers. Ethan turned off the lights and stretched out on the couch. It was too short for his frame, and the springs dug into his back. He could hear the distant rumble of the L train, the muffled sounds of Mrs. Chen's TV through the wall. Normal sounds, familiar sounds. He thought about tomorrow, about Lily's inevitable questions, about what he'd say to Mrs. Chen. Thought about the complications he'd just invited into his carefully balanced life. But mostly he thought about that moment in the plaza when he could have kept walking. When the smart thing, the safe thing, would have been to mind his own business. Ethan closed his eyes and decided he was okay with not being smart. Outside, the Chicago wind howled against the windows, but inside, for now, it was warm. Ethan woke to the smell of coffee he hadn't made. For a disoriented moment, he thought he was still dreaming, that Sarah was in the kitchen, humming off-key while she burned toast the way she always did. Then his back reminded him he'd slept on the couch, The springs had murdered his spine, and Sarah had been gone for 3 years. The coffee smell was real, though. He sat up, wincing, and found Isabella standing in his kitchen wearing the same wrinkled suit from last night. Her hair was pulled back in a messy knot, and she'd washed off yesterday's makeup, leaving her face bare and somehow younger. She was staring at his coffee maker like it had personally offended her. "Morning," Ethan said, his voice rough. She jumped, sloshing coffee onto the counter. "Sorry, I didn't mean to. I couldn't sleep, and I thought I'd make myself useful, but your coffee maker is from approximately 1987, and I think I broke it." "You didn't break it. It just sounds like that." Ethan stood, his knees cracking loud enough to make Isabella wince. "What time is it?" 6:15. He'd slept through his alarm. Ethan grabbed his phone, silenced the missed notifications, and headed for the bathroom. When he came back out 5 minutes later, teeth brushed, face splashed with cold water that did nothing for how tired he felt, Isabella had managed to pour 2 mugs of coffee without causing any disasters. "Thank you," he said, taking one. "For last night, for the bed." "Well, I should be thanking you." She wrapped both hands around her mug, that same gesture from last night. "I keep thinking I'm going to wake up in my own bed and this will all be some stress nightmare. But then I remember my bed isn't mine anymore, and this is actually happening." Ethan checked the time again. "I need to pick up Lily in 15 minutes. You're welcome to stay here while I'm gone, or can I come with you?" The question caught him off guard. Isabella was already moving, though, setting down her coffee, gathering up the papers she'd apparently organized into neat stacks on his coffee table sometime during her sleepless night. "You don't have to," Ethan said. "Mrs. Chen's place is just down the hall, but if you want privacy—" "I don't want to be alone right now." The admission came out fast, almost defensive. "If that's okay. I don't want to be alone." "Yeah, okay." They left the apartment together, Ethan locking the door while Isabella stood in the hallway looking uncertain in a way that seemed foreign to her, like she'd forgotten how to exist in spaces she didn't control. Mrs. Chen's apartment was 3 doors down, and Ethan knocked twice before using the key she'd given him years ago. Come in, Mrs. Chen called from somewhere inside. "Lily's eating breakfast." The apartment smelled like sesame oil and the floral air freshener Mrs. Chen bought in bulk from the Asian market on Halsted. Lily sat at the small kitchen table, methodically working through a bowl of Cheerios while watching cartoons on an iPad that was probably older than she was. She looked up when Ethan walked in, and her whole face transformed. "Daddy!" She scrambled down from the chair, Cheerios forgotten, and launched herself at his legs. Ethan caught her, lifted her up even though she was getting too big for it, buried his face in her hair that smelled like Mrs. Chen's lavender shampoo. "Hey, Bug. You sleep good?" "Uh-huh. Mrs. Chen let me stay up until 10 watching Bluey." She said this like it was a major accomplishment, then noticed Isabella standing in the doorway. "Who's that?" "This is Isabella," Ethan said, setting Lily down but keeping hold of her hand. "She's going to be staying with us for a little bit." Lily studied Isabella with the unfiltered assessment only 6-year-olds could manage. "Why?" "Because she needed help, and we have an extra bed." "But you don't have an extra bed. You only have your bed and my bed." "I slept on the couch." Lily's face scrunched up. "The couch is lumpy." "Yeah, I noticed." Mrs. Chen appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She was 73, had lived in this building for 40 years, and had opinions about everything. Her eyes went from Ethan to Isabella and back again, and Ethan could practically see her drawing conclusions. "Mrs. Chen, this is Isabella Hart," Ethan said before she could ask. "Isabella, Mrs. Chen, my neighbor and the only reason Lily and I haven't starved yet." "Don't be dramatic," Mrs. Chen said, but she was smiling. She turned to Isabella, and the smile shifted into something more evaluating. "You're the reason he came home so late?" "I'm sorry," Isabella said immediately. "I didn't mean to. It was an emergency, and Ethan was kind enough to help. He's too kind sometimes." Mrs. Chen handed Lily her backpack, already packed for school. "Gets it from his mother. She was the same way, always picking up strays." "I'm standing right here," Ethan said. "I know. That's why I'm telling her." Mrs. Chen patted Isabella's arm with surprising gentleness. "You look like you had a rough night, honey. You eating? Ethan's not much of a cook." I fed her, Ethan protested. Leftover pasta doesn't count. Mrs. Chen was already moving back toward her kitchen. Wait here. She disappeared and returned with a container of something that smelled amazing. Juke. Rice porridge. You heat it up, add the toppings I put in the small container, and it'll stick to your ribs better than whatever nonsense Ethan's been feeding you. Isabella took the container with an expression somewhere between grateful and overwhelmed. Thank you. You didn't have to. I know I didn't have to. I wanted to. Mrs. Chen squeezed her arm once, then turned to Ethan. You working today? 3 to 11. I can take Lily after school if you need. I can watch her, Isabella said suddenly. Everyone looked at her. She flushed but didn't back down. If that's okay, if you trust me, I don't have anywhere else to be, and I'd like to help. Ethan started to say no, not because he didn't trust her, but because it seemed like too much to ask. But Lily was already tugging on his hand, bouncing on her toes. Can she, Daddy, please? I can show her my room, and my stuffed animals, and my drawings, and… Lily, breathe. Ethan looked at Isabella. You sure? I'm sure. Mrs. Chen was watching them both with that expression that meant she was filing this away to discuss with the other building residents later. Well, if that's settled, Lily needs to get to school. Bus comes in 20 minutes. The walk back to the apartment was short but felt longer with Lily chattering nonstop about her favorite cartoons, her best friend Madison, who had lost a tooth, and the class guinea pig who was named Professor Whiskers and sometimes pooped in the tube. Isabella listened with the focused attention of someone trying to memorize a foreign language. Back in the apartment, Ethan made Lily's lunch, peanut butter sandwich, apple slices, the juice box she'd picked out herself, while she gathered her homework folder and library book. Isabella sat on the couch, still holding Mrs. Chen's container, watching them move through the morning routine with something unreadable on her face. Okay, Bug, Ethan said, zipping up Lily's backpack. You got everything? Yep. Homework? In my folder. A library book? Lily held it up, some early reader about a dragon who was afraid of flying. Perfect. Be good for Isabella, okay? Listen to what she says. Okay. Lily turned to Isabella, suddenly shy. Are you going to be here when I get home? I'll be here, Isabella said softly. Do you like coloring? Yes. I like coloring. Okay, good, because I have a lot of coloring books and sometimes Daddy colors, but he's not very good at staying in the lines. Hey, Ethan said. I stay in the lines. You really don't. Lily kissed his cheek, waved at Isabella, and headed for the door. Bye. Love you. And then she was gone, her footsteps thundering down the stairs, and the apartment fell into sudden quiet. Isabella set down the porridge container carefully. She's lovely. She's a handful. Ethan started cleaning up the breakfast dishes. But yeah, she's pretty great. How long has it been since her mother… 3 years. Lily was 3 when Sarah died. Ovarian cancer. Stage 4 by the time they caught it. The words came out flat, practiced. He'd said them enough times that they'd lost their sharp edges. She fought for 18 months, made it to Lily's 3rd birthday, and then she didn't. I'm sorry. Yeah. Ethan dried his hands on a dish towel that said, I'm not arguing, I'm just explaining why I'm right. Me too. Isabella was quiet for a moment. Then she said, My mother loved that saying about how it takes a village. She'd say it whenever I complained about family friends showing up unannounced or neighbors being nosy. I thought it was annoying, but you have that. Mrs. Chen, this building, people who show up with porridge and watch your daughter and know when the bus comes. I got lucky with Mrs. Chen. It's not luck. You built that. You showed up, you helped people. You didn't pretend like you had it all together. She looked around the small apartment. I built $1 billion company, and I don't have a single person who would bring me porridge. Ethan didn't know what to say to that. He rinsed the last dish, set it in the drainer, and checked the time. I need to shower and get ready for work. You'll be okay here? Yes, go. Isabella gestured vaguely at the apartment. I'll figure something out. In the shower, Ethan let the hot water pound against his shoulders and tried to process the fact that he had a stranger living in his apartment. A stranger who was apparently worth over $1 billion and who'd lost everything in 24 hours. The whole situation felt surreal, like he'd stepped sideways into someone else's life. When he came back out, dressed in his work uniform, cargo pants, steel-toed boots, the company polo that had seen better days, Isabella was on her phone. Not the fancy smartphone she'd probably had before, but some ancient flip phone she must have pulled from her purse. "I'm calling lawyers," she said without looking up. "Left messages with 3 firms. No one's calling back yet, but it's early. You need anything? Food, supplies, whatever?" "No. Yes. Maybe." She closed the phone with a snap. "I don't know what I need. I keep making lists and then realizing half the things on the list require money I can't access or connections that have already disappeared. Do you know what it's like to suddenly realize you don't know how to function without your credit cards and your assistant and your—" She stopped herself. "Sorry, I'm spiraling." "You're dealing with some serious shit," Ethan said. "You're allowed to spiral." "I'm not, though. I'm not allowed to fall apart, because falling apart is exactly what Marcus wants everyone to think I'm doing. Every moment I spend crying or panicking or being useless is a moment he's consolidating power and erasing evidence and building his case." She stood up, started pacing. "I need to fight back. I need to find a lawyer who'll take me on contingency. I need to access my files somehow. I need to figure out which board members might be persuaded to flip their votes if they knew the truth." "Isabella." She stopped pacing, looked at him. "Breathe," Ethan said. "You can't do any of that today. Today you're going to eat Mrs. Chen's porridge, maybe take a shower that lasts longer than 5 minutes, and watch a 6-year-old after school. Tomorrow, you can save the world." I don't have time to... You have nothing but time. Your accounts are frozen, your company's gone, and you're wearing the same suit you had on yesterday. Charging forward without a plan is just going to get you hurt worse. He grabbed his work bag from the closet. "Sometimes you need to stop and catch your breath before the next round. Trust me. I learned that the hard way." Isabella looked like she wanted to argue. Then something in her expression shifted and she sat back down. Okay, you're right. I hate that you're right, but you're right. Story of my life." Ethan headed for the door, then paused. "Lily gets off the bus at 3:45. She'll walk herself up. She knows the routine, but she'll be expecting you. There's snacks in the cabinet above the fridge, and she'll want to show you everything she owns. Just go with it." "Got it. Snacks and enthusiasm." "Yeah." He opened the door, then looked back one more time. "Isabella, it's going to be okay. Maybe not today, maybe not this week, but it will be." She didn't answer, just nodded once. Ethan left her there, sitting in his crappy apartment, surrounded by the scattered pieces of her former life, and hoped like hell he was right. The distribution center was the same as always, massive, loud, full of people moving through their shifts with practiced efficiency. Ethan clocked in, grabbed his scanner, and joined the flow. Around him, forklifts beeped, conveyor belts rumbled, and the voice of dispatch crackled over the intercom with routing updates and break schedules. "Cole, you're on receiving today." Ethan made his way to the dock, where shipments came in faster than they could be processed. He worked steadily, scanning boxes, checking manifests, directing everything to the right zone. The work was mindless enough that his brain could wander, and it wandered straight back to his apartment, to Isabella Hart, sitting on his couch trying to rebuild a life from fragments. "Hey, Ethan." Marcus, different Marcus, nice Marcus from shipping, appeared with a clipboard. "You seen the news?" "What news?" "That tech CEO who got fired yesterday, Hart something. They're saying she embezzled like $50 million. Marcus shook his head. "Can you imagine? Having that much money and still stealing more?" Ethan's hand stilled on the scanner. "Where'd you hear that?" "It's all over. Tribune ran a story this morning. There's video of her getting escorted out of her building, totally losing it, screaming at security, crying, the whole thing." Marcus scrolled through his phone, pulled up an article, showed it to Ethan. The headline read, "Vanguard Tech CEO Isabella Hart removed amid embezzlement investigation." Below it, a photo of Isabella, professional headshot, confident smile, everything she wasn't right now. And below that, a blurry phone video of her in the lobby of her building, security guards on either side, her mouth open in what looked like a scream. "Says here the board voted unanimously to remove her," Marcus continued. "New CEO is some guy named Delacroix. He's already giving interviews about healing the company and rebuilding trust." Ethan handed back the phone. "People believe this?" "Why wouldn't they? I mean, it happens all the time, right? Rich people getting richer by stealing. At least this time someone got caught. Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. Anyway, we got 3 trucks backing up. You ready? Yeah, ready. But Ethan wasn't ready. He worked through his shift with that article playing on repeat in his head. By the time lunch break rolled around, he'd pulled it up on his own phone, read the whole thing. The Tribune article was damning. They quoted anonymous board members who expressed deep concern about Isabella's mental state. They cited the mountain of evidence Marcus Delacroix had presented. They included a statement from Vanguard's PR team about their commitment to transparency and accountability. Isabella wasn't mentioned as a person. She was mentioned as a problem, a scandal, a cautionary tale about power and corruption. Ethan thought about the woman in his apartment, thought about the way her hands had shaken in the cold, the desperation in her voice when she'd talked about those scattered papers, the lost look in her eyes when she'd admitted she had nowhere to go. Then he thought about Marcus Delacroix giving interviews about healing and trust, while $40 million of stolen money sat somewhere in accounts Isabella couldn't prove existed. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Hello? Ethan? It's Isabella. I'm using Mrs. Chen's phone. Mine's dead and I don't have my charger. I just wanted to let you know Lily's home and we're fine. She's showing me her rock collection. In the background, Ethan could hear Lily's voice. This one's from the park, and this one's from the lake, and this one I found in the parking lot, but Daddy says it's probably just concrete, but I think it's special anyway. Sounds intense, Ethan said. It's very intense. There are a lot of rocks. Isabella paused. Have you seen the news? Yeah. It's everywhere. Every major outlet. Marcus gave an interview to Bloomberg. He's playing the reluctant hero who had to make the painful decision to remove a beloved colleague for the good of the company. Her voice was tight, controlled. He's good. I'll give him that. He's very good. What are you going to do? I don't know yet, but I found something in those papers I grabbed. Account numbers that might link to the shell companies. It's not much, but it's something. I called 2 more lawyers, left messages. One actually called back, said he'd think about it. She let out a breath. I'm not giving up. Just so you know, this isn't over. Didn't think it was. Lily's voice got louder. Isabella, you have to see this one. It's pink. I have to go, Isabella said. The pink rock apparently requires immediate attention. Thanks for everything, for letting me be here. Yeah, see you tonight. Ethan hung up and sat there for the rest of his break, staring at nothing. Around him, the warehouse hummed and beeped and moved. Everyone focused on their own tasks, their own problems. None of them knew that in a crappy apartment on the south side, a woman who used to run a billion-dollar company was currently admiring a 6-year-old's rock collection. The rest of his shift crawled. By the time Ethan clocked out at 11:15, his back was screaming and his legs felt like lead. The bus ride home took forever, and he spent it staring out the window at the city sliding past, lights and shadows, and people living their lives in buildings he'd never enter. When he finally made it back to his apartment, he found Lily asleep on the couch, covered with the Afghan, while Isabella sat at the kitchen table surrounded by papers. She'd changed, wearing one of his old t-shirts and a pair of sweatpants that must have been swimming on her. Her hair was wet from a shower. Hey, she said quietly. I hope you don't mind. I borrowed some clothes. I'll wash the suit, but it needs to be dry cleaned, and I don't exactly have dry cleaning money right now. It's fine. Ethan dropped his bag by the door, moved to the couch. Lily had one hand curled under her chin, her mouth slightly open. She fall asleep watching TV? About an hour ago. We had dinner. I made pasta, used what was in your fridge. I hope that's okay. And then she wanted to watch a movie. We got halfway through Frozen, and she was out. Isabella smiled, and it was the first real smile Ethan had seen from her. She's wonderful, really. She talked about you constantly. My daddy says, and my daddy does, and my daddy makes the best grilled cheese. You're very much her hero. Ethan felt something warm and uncomfortable settle in his chest. She's easy to love. She asked about her mom, about Sarah. What'd you tell her? That I didn't know her, but she must have been special to have a daughter like Lily. Isabella pulled the t-shirt sleeves over her hands. She said Sarah used to sing all the time, even when she was sick. She said sometimes she can't remember what her voice sounded like, and that makes her sad. Ethan had to look away. Yeah, me too. They sat in the quiet apartment, Lily sleeping between them, the refrigerator humming its off-key song. Finally, Isabella said, "A lawyer called back. Real one, not just a paralegal. His name is David Chen. No relation to your Mrs. Chen, I checked. He specializes in corporate litigation. He said if I can provide preliminary evidence of fraud, he'll consider taking the case on contingency." That's good. It's something. I have a meeting with him Thursday morning. He's coming here if that's okay. I told him my circumstances, and he said he understood. She looked down at her papers. I've been going through everything I grabbed. There's enough here to at least raise questions. Account numbers, transaction dates, correspondence that contradicts the timeline Marcus is presenting. It's not proof. Not yet. But it's a start. What do you need? Isabella looked up at him. What? What do you need to build your case, to fight back, whatever? What do you need? Access to Vanguard servers, my original files, the full forensic audit I commissioned, testimony from employees who might have seen something. She laughed, bitter. Basically, everything I don't have and can't get. But if you had it, if someone could get it, what would that look like? Why? You planning to break into Vanguard's headquarters and steal their server backups? No, but I'm asking what you need because maybe there's a way to get it that doesn't involve breaking and entering. Isabella studied him for a long moment. You're serious? You got screwed, publicly, by someone who stole $40 million and is now giving interviews about accountability. Yeah, I'm serious. Ethan leaned back, rubbed his face. I don't know anything about corporate law or tech companies or billion-dollar scandals, but I know how to work, I know how to help. So if there's something I can do, tell me what it is. Something shifted in Isabella's expression, that hard shell cracking just slightly. Why do you care? This isn't your fight. You're sitting in my kitchen, wearing my t-shirt and helping my daughter with her homework. Kind of makes it my fight now. Isabella opened her mouth, closed it. Then she picked up one of her papers, studied it like the answer might be written there. Okay, there might be something. Before I was removed, I gave copies of my preliminary findings to my assistant, Melissa. We've worked together for 8 years. She's loyal, or at least I thought she was. She didn't respond to the message I left on her personal number, but maybe if I could talk to her face to face, she might still have those files. Where does she live? Evanston. But Ethan, if Marcus has gotten to her, if he's offered her money or threatened her position, she's not going to help. And approaching her could make things worse for everyone. Or it could get you what you need. Ethan checked his phone calendar. I'm off tomorrow. We could drive up there, see if she'll talk to you. You don't have a car. I'll borrow one. From who? I'll figure it out. Isabella stared at him like he'd suggested they sprout wings and fly to Evanston. You're really willing to do this? Drive to another city, track down my former assistant, potentially put yourself in the middle of a legal nightmare that could get very ugly very fast. Yeah. Why? Ethan thought about that. About the woman he'd found kneeling in the snow. About Lily asking if Isabella would be there when she got home. About the quiet way Isabella had listened to his daughter talk about rocks and movies, and mothers who sang even when they were dying. Because you shouldn't have to do this alone, he said finally. And because someone needs to call bullshit on guys like Marcus Delacroix who think they can just take everything and walk away clean. Isabella's eyes were wet. She blinked rapidly, looked away. Okay, we'll go to Evanston. Tomorrow. But Ethan? If this goes south, if things get complicated, you walk away. You have Lily to think about. You don't owe me anything. I know I don't owe you, but I'm in this now anyway. He stood, carefully lifted Lily from the couch. She stirred, mumbled something about pink rocks, then settled against his shoulder. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we'll start getting your life back. He carried Lily to her room, tucked her in with the practiced ease of 3 years of single parenting. When he came back out, Isabella had cleared away most of her papers but left one stack on the table. Evidence, fragments, pieces of a case she was building from scratch. Ethan, she said as he headed for the bathroom. Yeah? Thank you, really, for all of this. He wanted to say it was nothing, but that would be a lie. It was something. Something big and probably stupid and definitely more complicated than picking up a stranger in the cold. You're welcome, he said instead, and meant it. That night, lying on his too short couch in the dark, Ethan listened to the familiar sounds of his apartment and the unfamiliar sound of someone else breathing in his bedroom. Outside, Chicago carried on, sirens in the distance, the rumble of late-night trains, the city that never quite slept. Tomorrow they'd drive to Evanston. Tomorrow they'd start fighting back. But tonight, in this small apartment with its lumpy couch and stick-figure drawings, they'd given each other something neither had expected to find, a reason to keep going. Mrs. Chen's nephew had a car. Ethan stood in the hallway at 7 in the morning, holding a container of the leftover juk Isabella had reheated as a peace offering, while Mrs. Chen made a phone call that involved a lot of rapid Cantonese and what sounded like negotiation. "He says $50 for the day," Mrs. Chen announced, covering the phone. "Gas included, but you scratch it, you pay. Deal." 20 minutes later, a beat-up Honda Civic pulled up outside with a dent in the passenger door and a smell inside that suggested someone had once transported either very old cheese or a small, dead animal. The nephew, Tommy, early 20s, engineering student at UIC, handed over the keys with minimal enthusiasm. "Back by 6, he said. "I got class at 7. "We'll be back by 5, Ethan promised. Tommy looked skeptical but pocketed the $50 and headed toward the L station. Ethan returned to the apartment to find Isabella dressed in the only clothes she had, the navy suit now showing definite signs of wear, paired with his old Northwestern sweatshirt underneath because the suit jacket alone wasn't enough for the cold. She'd pulled her hair back in a ponytail and looked younger, less polished, more human. Lily sat at the table eating cereal, swinging her legs. "Where are you going?" "Evanston," Ethan said. "We'll be back before you get home from school. Can I come?" "Not today, Bug. School day." Lily's face fell into that expression that meant she was gearing up to argue, but Isabella crouched down beside her chair. "Hey, I need you to do something important for me today." "What?" "I need you to go to school and learn everything you can. Math, reading, science, all of it. Because smart girls who pay attention in school grow up to be the kind of women who can't be pushed around. Can you do that?" Lily considered this seriously. "Okay, but you have to tell me what you learned when you get back." "Deal." They dropped Lily at the bus stop, watched her climb aboard with her backpack and lunchbox, waited until the bus pulled away before getting into the Civic. Isabella wrinkled her nose at the smell but didn't comment. Ethan cranked the heat, which made the smell worse, and pulled into traffic. The drive north took 40 minutes through morning rush hour. Isabella spent most of it on Mrs. Chen's borrowed phone, checking her messages, still nothing from most of the lawyers she'd contacted, and occasionally giving Ethan directions. They didn't talk much. The silence felt heavy with everything they weren't saying, all the ways this could go wrong. Melissa Turner lived in a townhouse in a neighborhood where the streets had trees and the houses had yards. Ethan found parking 2 blocks away, and they sat in the car for a moment, the engine ticking as it cooled. "You ready?" Ethan asked. Isabella stared at the townhouse with its neat brick facade and window boxes that probably held flowers in the spring. "No, but I'm doing it anyway." They walked up together. Isabella's heels clicked on the sidewalk, the same heels she'd worn 2 nights ago, now scuffed and salt-stained. She rang the doorbell, and they waited. Ethan could see her hands shaking. The door opened. The woman who answered was maybe 30, blonde, wearing yoga pants and an expression that went from curious to horrified in half a second. "Isabella." "Hi, Melissa." "You can't be here." "I know, I'm sorry, but I need to talk to you. 5 minutes, please." Melissa glanced past them like she expected to see cameras, reporters, someone documenting this. "They said you might try to contact me. They said I should call security if you showed up." "I'm not here to cause trouble. I just need to know if you still have the files I gave you. The preliminary audit, the account records, everything I asked you to keep copies of." "I don't." Melissa's voice was firm, but her eyes said something different. "I turned everything over to the company. It's all part of the investigation." "Melissa, it's me. You've worked for me for 8 years. You know me. Do you really think I embezzled $40 million? I don't know what to think." But Melissa's hand tightened on the doorframe. The evidence they showed the board was convincing. Emails, transactions, everything had your authorization codes. Because Marcus forged them. He's been planning this for months, maybe years, and he's good at it. But you knew something was wrong. You helped me investigate. You saw the same irregularities I did. That was before. Melissa looked at Ethan for the first time. Who are you? Ethan Cole. Friend. She doesn't have friends. She has contacts and colleagues and people who want something from her. Melissa's voice was sharp, defensive. That's what Marcus said, that Isabella was so isolated she'd become paranoid, seeing conspiracies everywhere because she couldn't trust anyone. That's bullshit, Ethan said, and you know it. Melissa blinked. Then something in her expression shifted. You're right, it is bullshit. It is, but it's convincing bullshit, and I have a mortgage and student loans and a career I can't afford to lose because I backed the wrong horse. I'm not asking you to back me publicly, Isabella said. I'm asking if you kept copies, personal copies, anything that might help me prove what actually happened. Why would I do that? Because you're smart. Because you've been in corporate long enough to know that when power shifts that fast, the people in the middle get caught in the blast. Marcus cleaned house after I left. He fired 6 department heads in the first 24 hours. You're still there, so either you're incredibly lucky or you gave him a reason to keep you around. Isabella leaned forward slightly. Which means you know exactly how dangerous he is, and you kept copies because you wanted insurance. Melissa's jaw tightened. She looked at Ethan again, then back at Isabella. If I had copies, and I'm not saying I do, what would you do with them? Build a case. Find a lawyer who'll take me seriously. Prove that Marcus committed fraud and framed me for it. Get my company back. Your company doesn't exist anymore. Even if you prove everything, even if you're right about all of it, Vanguard is his now. The board won't reverse their vote. The optics are too bad. Then I'll burn it down. Isabella's voice was cold, certain. I'll expose everything. The fraud, the corruption, every illegal thing Marcus did to get control. And when I'm done, there won't be a Vanguard left for him to run. Melissa stared at her. You'd really do that? Destroy everything you built? It stopped being mine the moment they stole it. Now it's just evidence. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Melissa said, "Wait here." She disappeared into the house. Ethan and Isabella stood on the porch in the cold morning air. A car drove past. A dog barked somewhere. Normal life continuing like the world wasn't quietly imploding for the woman standing beside him. She's not coming back, Isabella said quietly. Give her a minute. She's probably calling security right now, or Marcus, or... The door opened. Melissa held out a thumb drive. This is everything, she said. The original audit files, the account records you compiled, correspondence between you and the investigator you hired, and some things I noticed myself after you were removed. Transaction approvals that went through after you were locked out of the system. Email chains that contradict the timeline Marcus presented to the board. Isabella took the drive with both hands like it might evaporate. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This doesn't prove you're innocent. It just raises questions. You'll still need expert testimony, forensic analysis, cooperation from people who are now terrified of Marcus. Melissa wrapped her arms around herself. And Isabella? I can't help you beyond this. If anyone asks, I never saw you. We never talked. I have to protect myself. I understand. No, I don't think you do. Melissa's voice cracked slightly. I admired you. I wanted to be like you. And watching them destroy you in one afternoon, watching how easily everyone turned on you, how quickly you became the villain. It was terrifying. Because if it can happen to you, it can happen to anyone. Then help me make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else. I gave you the drive. That's all I can do. Melissa stepped back, already closing the door. I'm sorry. I really am. But I can't go down with you. The door shut. The lock clicked. Isabella stood there holding the thumb drive, staring at the closed door. Then she turned and walked back to the car, her heels clicking with each step. Ethan followed. They sat in the Honda for a full minute before Isabella spoke. She's right, she said. I would have done the same thing. Protected myself, kept my head down, justified it as survival. That's what the corporate world teaches you. Look out for yourself because no one else will. But she gave you the files. Because she's scared, not because she believes in justice or wants to help me, because she knows Marcus is dangerous and she wanted insurance. Isabella turned the thumb drive over in her hands. This is what I built. A culture where people are so terrified of losing their positions that they'll stand by and watch someone get destroyed rather than risk speaking up. You didn't build that alone. Marcus helped. I hired Marcus. I gave him power. I was so focused on growth and success that I didn't see what he was building right under my nose. She looked out the window at the neat townhouses, the peaceful street. You know what the worst part is? I don't even know if I can blame him. I created the environment where this was possible, where loyalty was transactional and trust was a liability. He just played the game better than I did. Ethan started the car. You know that's bullshit, right? He didn't play a game. He committed fraud. He stole money and ruined lives and built his empire on lies. That's not winning. That's just being a criminal who hasn't been caught yet. Maybe. Not maybe. Definitely. Ethan pulled into traffic, headed back toward the highway. And we're going to catch him. Isabella didn't respond, just held the thumb drive like a lifeline and stared out the window as Evanston gave way to highway, then to the outskirts of Chicago. The silence stretched until Ethan couldn't stand it anymore. Tell me about the company, he said. Not the corporate structure or the market value. Tell me why you started it, what you were trying to build. Isabella was quiet for so long Ethan thought she wouldn't answer. Then she said, My parents died when I was 19. Car accident. Some drunk driver ran a red light, and that was it. They were gone. I'm sorry. I was in my sophomore year at Stanford. Computer science major, full scholarship, future so bright I needed sunglasses. You know the story. And suddenly I had to deal with funeral arrangements and insurance claims and closing down their lives while still trying to pass my midterms. Her voice was flat, distant. The worst part was the data. They had accounts everywhere: banking, insurance, retirement, social media, photos stored on 3 different cloud services. Every company had different procedures for handling deceased users. Some required death certificates. Some required probate documents. Some just locked the accounts forever because their policies didn't account for what happens when someone dies. She shifted in her seat, still not looking at him. It took me 8 months to sort through everything. 8 months of phone calls and forms and fighting with bureaucrats who saw me as an obstacle to their lunch break. And I thought, this is insane. We've built all this technology, all these systems to track and store and analyze human life. But we haven't built any systems to help when that life ends. So you built one. Not exactly. I started with data management, ways to consolidate information, streamline access, create unified systems that could talk to each other. The idea was to make it easier for families dealing with loss to access and manage the digital remains of loved ones. But that's not profitable, so I pivoted. Enterprise solutions, helping companies manage their own data more efficiently. Same underlying technology, different application. And it worked. It worked too well. Within 5 years, we were handling data infrastructure for major corporations. Within 10, we were one of the leading analytics firms in the country. I hired hundreds of people, made millions of dollars, got written up in every tech publication that mattered. She finally looked at him, and somewhere along the way, I forgot why I started. Forgot that I was supposed to be helping people, not just building systems to help companies make more money. You still helped people. Your employees had jobs, your clients got better services. Sure. And Marcus had access to more money than he could steal in a lifetime. Isabella turned the thumb drive over in her hands again. My parents were teachers, high school math and English. They believed education could change lives, and I took their death and turned it into a billion-dollar company that helps corporations optimize their profit margins. I'm not sure they'd be proud of that. They'd be proud you survived, that you built something from nothing, that you didn't give up when things got hard. I gave up on their dream, though. I gave up on using technology to actually help people and focused on using it to make money instead. That's the compromise everyone makes, right? The idealism of youth giving way to the pragmatism of adulthood. Except pragmatism is just another word for selling out. Ethan thought about that as he navigated traffic, about dreams deferred and compromises made, and the distance between who you wanted to be and who you had to be to survive. My wife wanted to be a painter, he said, real artist type. She could look at something and capture it perfectly. The light, the shadows, the feeling of a moment. She was good, really good. But you can't pay rent with painting, so she worked retail, sold clothes at Macy's, smiled at customers, folded sweaters for 8 hours a day, came home exhausted. And on weekends, she'd paint, just a few hours here and there, whenever she could find time. Isabella was watching him now. After she died, I found dozens of paintings in our storage unit. Scenes of Lily as a baby, the park near our old apartment, abstract stuff I didn't understand but that felt like her. She never showed them to anyone, never tried to sell them or display them or do anything with them, just painted for herself, keeping that dream alive even though it wasn't practical. He paused at a red light. And I used to think that was sad, that she'd given up on her dream. But now I think maybe she didn't give up. Maybe she just found a different way to keep it, a way that let her survive and still be herself. What happened to the paintings? They're in Lily's room, hung up on every available wall. She looks at them before bed every night, says it's like having her mom there with her. The light turned green. Point is, I don't think your parents would care about the company or the money or the market value. I think they'd care that you survived losing them, that you built something that mattered to you, and that you're fighting to protect it now, even when it would be easier to walk away. Isabella's eyes were wet. She blinked hard, looked away. Ethan. Yeah? Thank you for driving me today, for listening, for not treating me like I'm crazy or radioactive or... Her voice caught. Thank you. You're welcome. They drove the rest of the way in comfortable silence. By the time they pulled up outside Ethan's building, it was barely 11. The meeting with the lawyer wasn't until tomorrow morning. They had the thumb drive with evidence that might or might not be useful. And they had the rest of the day stretching ahead with nothing to do but wait. Mrs. Chen was sitting on the front stoop despite the cold, bundled in a coat that looked like it had survived the Ice Age. She stood when she saw them. Good, you're back. There's someone waiting for you. Ethan's stomach dropped. Who? Says his name is David Chen, the lawyer. He called this morning, said he had a cancellation, and could meet earlier if you were available. I told him you were out, but would be back soon. He's been waiting in my apartment for the last hour. Isabella and Ethan exchanged looks. Then they followed Mrs. Chen inside. David Chen was younger than Ethan expected, maybe 40, dressed in a suit that managed to look expensive and approachable at the same time. He stood when they entered, shook hands with both of them, and accepted a cup of tea from Mrs. Chen with practiced ease. Thank you for seeing me on short notice, he said, once they'd moved to Ethan's apartment. I reviewed the information you provided over the phone, Ms. Hart, and I wanted to discuss your case sooner rather than later. Why? Isabella asked. What changed? I did some research, called in a few favors, spoke with people who know Marcus Delacroix's reputation. David set down his tea. You're not the first person he's done this to. The words hung in the air. Isabella sat down slowly on the couch. What? 3 years ago, Delacroix was CFO at a tech startup in San Francisco. Company was valued at around $200 million, showing promising growth. 6 months after he came on board, the CEO was removed under similar circumstances. Accusations of financial impropriety, erratic behavior, betrayal of board confidence. The CEO tried to fight it, but Delacroix had documentation, testimonies, everything lined up perfectly. The CEO lost everything. Company was acquired 6 months later for parts. Delacroix walked away with a golden parachute and a reputation for saving the company from its unstable founder. Why didn't anyone investigate? They did. SEC looked into it, found nothing actionable. The CEO's lawyer tried to pursue civil remedies, but without concrete evidence of fraud, it went nowhere. The CEO ended up settling for a fraction of what he was owed just to make it stop. David pulled out a tablet, brought up a file. Before that, there was a biotech firm in Boston. Similar pattern. Delacroix joins as CFO, gains trust, orchestrates a quiet coup. Original leadership gets forced out under questionable circumstances. That CEO didn't even try to fight, just took the settlement and disappeared. Isabella's face had gone pale. He's done this before, multiple times. At least 3 that I've found. Probably more if I dig deeper. Marcus Delacroix is very good at identifying companies with vulnerable leadership, gaining their trust, and systematically dismantling them from the inside. He's smart, patient, and ruthless. And he's built a network of enablers, board members, lawyers, accountants, who help him pull it off. So why hasn't anyone stopped him? Because he's careful, he doesn't leave obvious trails. He builds legitimate-looking cases that hold up under scrutiny. And most importantly, he targets people who can't fight back, people who are isolated, who've built their companies at the expense of personal relationships, who have more to lose than to gain by going public. David looked at Isabella directly. People like you. Thanks for the vote of confidence. I'm not saying it to be cruel. I'm saying it because it's the truth. And if we're going to beat him, we need to understand exactly what we're up against. David opened his briefcase, pulled out a legal pad. I'll take your case. Contingency basis. I get a percentage of any settlement or damages we recover, nothing if we lose. But you need to understand what this means. This will be brutal. Marcus has resources, connections, and a track record of winning these fights. He'll drag your name through every media outlet he can find. He'll make your life hell, and there's no guarantee we'll win. I don't care. Isabella's voice was steady. I want my company back. I want Marcus in prison, and I want everyone to know what he did. Then we start building the case. What do you have for me? Isabella pulled out the thumb drive. Everything, or at least enough to start. David took it, turned it over. Where did you get this? Former colleague. She kept copies of the preliminary investigation I conducted before I was removed. Will she testify? No. Then it's useful for our investigation, but potentially inadmissible in court. Anything else? Observations. Timeline inconsistencies, the fact that Marcus has done this before to other CEOs. Isabella leaned forward. What about the other victims? The CEOs he removed from their companies. Would they testify? Potentially. If I can find them, convince them to come forward, and prove their cases are connected to yours. It's a long shot, but it might establish a pattern. David made notes on his legal pad. Here's what we need to do. First, get a forensic accountant to analyze the data on this drive. Second, file an injunction to freeze any questionable transactions and prevent Marcus from liquidating assets. Third, depose key witnesses, board members, executives, anyone who was involved in your removal. Fourth, investigate Marcus's financial history. Find every shell company and suspicious transaction. And fifth, prepare for this to take months, possibly years. I don't have months. Every day Marcus is in control of my company. He's destroying evidence and consolidating power. I know, but rushing into court without a solid case will just give him another win. We do this right, or we don't do it at all. David closed his briefcase. I'll start immediately. Get the forensic accountant, file preliminary motions, begin the deposition process. But Ms. Hart, I need you to be smart about this. Stay out of the public eye. Don't contact anyone from Vanguard. Don't post on social media. Don't give Marcus any ammunition he can use against you. I don't have social media access. My accounts are locked. Good. Keep it that way. The less visible you are, the better. David stood, shook hands with both of them again. I'll be in touch in a few days. In the meantime, if you think of anything else that might be useful, documents, witnesses, anything, let me know immediately. After he left, Ethan and Isabella sat in the sudden quiet of the apartment. The morning's optimism had faded into something heavier, more complicated. The thumb drive sat on the coffee table between them, evidence that might save her or might not be enough. Months, Isabella said. Possibly years. You have somewhere else to be. No, that's the problem. I have nowhere else to be. No job, no company, no purpose beyond sitting in your apartment and waiting for lawyers to build a case that might not even work. So find a purpose. Like what? I don't know, but you're smart, you're capable, and sitting around feeling sorry for yourself isn't going to change anything. Ethan checked the time. It's almost noon. Lily doesn't get home for 4 hours. You want to help me meal prep for the week? Isabella blinked. Meal prep. Yeah, I usually do it on Sundays, but I didn't get to it this week because I was busy rescuing failed CEOs from snowstorms. So now I'm behind, and if I don't catch up, we'll be eating takeout all week, which I can't afford. You want me to help you cook? Unless you've got something better to do. Isabella looked around the apartment, at the scattered papers from her case, the thumb drive with all her evidence, the life that had imploded around her. Then she looked at Ethan, standing in his kitchen with an apron that said Grill Sergeant, waiting for an answer. Okay, she said. Teach me to meal prep. For the next 3 hours, they cooked. Ethan walked Isabella through his system: chicken breast in bulk, roasted vegetables, rice and pasta that could be reheated throughout the week. She was terrible at it. Burned the first batch of chicken, cut the vegetables unevenly, couldn't figure out how to use his rice cooker. But she kept trying, kept asking questions, kept working until they had enough food portioned into containers to last the next 7 days. By the time Lily got home, they were both covered in flour and laughing about the third batch of vegetables Isabella had managed to actually burn, despite them being in water. Lily burst through the door, saw them in the kitchen, and immediately wanted to help. "What are you making?" "Dinner for the rest of forever," Isabella said, wiping flour off her cheek. "Want to help us finish?" "Yes!" And just like that, the three of them stood in the tiny kitchen of a crappy Southside apartment, making food and making noise, and making something that felt almost like normal. Outside, the legal case waited. The threat of Marcus Delacroix waited. The uncertain future waited. But in that moment, with Lily narrating her entire school day while Isabella tried to explain to her why vegetables needed to be cooked, Ethan felt something shift. Not hope, exactly. Not yet. But maybe the possibility of hope. The sense that sometimes when everything fell apart, you could build something new from the pieces. Something smaller, something simpler, something real. The forensic accountant's report arrived 6 weeks later, and it changed everything. David Chen called on a Thursday morning while Ethan was at work, and Isabella was helping Lily with a school project about the solar system. Mrs. Chen had contributed a styrofoam ball collection that predated the moon landing, and the apartment had transformed into a papier-mâché disaster zone. Isabella had gotten surprisingly good at crafts, which Ethan found both amusing and oddly touching. "We have him," David said when Isabella called back from Mrs. Chen's phone. "The forensic analysis proves the money trail leads directly to shell companies Marcus controls, and we found something else. He made a mistake." Isabella's hand tightened on the phone. "What kind of mistake?" "He got greedy. Started moving money while you were still technically CEO. Some of the transactions have your authorization codes, but they happened while you were in meetings with witnesses who can verify you weren't at your computer. We can prove the codes were used fraudulently." "That's enough for criminal charges?" "It's enough to get the FBI interested. I've already reached out to their financial crimes division. They're reviewing the evidence now." David paused. "Isabella, this is going to get bigger. Once the FBI gets involved, this becomes a federal case. Marcus will lawyer up, the media will go insane, and everything about your life will be dissected in public. Are you ready for that?" Isabella looked around the apartment. Lily was carefully painting Jupiter, her tongue stuck out in concentration. The kitchen still smelled like the breakfast Isabella had burned that morning. She'd gotten better at cooking, but scrambled eggs still defeated her. Through the wall, she could hear Mrs. Chen's TV playing game shows at maximum volume. 6 weeks ago, she would have said she had nothing left to lose. Now she realized that was a lie. She had this small, chaotic, imperfect life that somehow felt more real than anything she'd built before. "I'm ready," she said. "Good. I'm filing motions tomorrow. This is going to move fast now." After she hung up, Isabella sat on the couch holding the phone while her hand shook. Lily looked up from her painting. "Isabella? You okay?" "Yeah, Bug, I'm okay." Isabella set down the phone carefully. "I just got some good news. Scary good news." "What's scary good news?" "News that's going to change things, but change isn't always bad." Lily considered this with the seriousness she applied to everything. "Daddy says change is like when the seasons turn. Sometimes it's cold and sometimes it's warm, but it's always moving." "Your dad's pretty smart." "I know. That's why I keep him." Isabella laughed despite everything, and helped Lily finish painting Jupiter with rings that weren't astronomically accurate, but looked beautiful anyway. When Ethan got home that night, Isabella was waiting on the couch with the printout David had couriered over. Lily was asleep in her room, exhausted from her solar system triumph. The apartment was quiet, except for the radiator and the distant sound of the city. "We have him," Isabella said as soon as Ethan walked in. The forensic accountant found everything: transaction records, shell companies, fraudulent authorization codes. David's filing motions tomorrow, and the FBI is reviewing the evidence. Ethan dropped his work bag, sat down beside her. "That's good." That's really good. It means everything's about to explode. Media, investigations, depositions, trials. David says it could take a year or more to resolve fully, but the injunction should freeze Marcus's assets within days. He won't be able to move money or destroy evidence. She looked down at the report in her hands. And it means I need to figure out what comes next. After. After you win, you mean? If I win. Even David says it's not guaranteed. Marcus will fight this with everything he has. She set down the report. But either way, I need to figure out who I am now, because I'm not who I was before all this happened. Ethan leaned back, studying her. 6 weeks had changed Isabella in ways that went beyond the borrowed clothes and the lack of makeup. She moved differently now, less like she was performing confidence and more like she'd found actual ground under her feet. She laughed more, cried more, burned food, and didn't apologize for it. Played with Lily like she'd forgotten how to be anything other than present. "Who do you want to be?" he asked. "I don't know yet, but I know I don't want to go back to what I was. The 100-hour weeks, the board meetings, the constant performance. Even if I get Vanguard back, I don't think I want to run it the same way. Maybe I don't want to run it at all." "So what would you do?" Isabella was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "When I started Vanguard, I wanted to help people. Before it became about money and growth and market share, it was about making systems that worked for humans instead of against them. I forgot that somewhere along the way. Got too focused on scaling up, on becoming the biggest and the best." She looked at him. "What if I started over? Built something smaller, something that actually serves the people it's supposed to help?" "Like what?" "I've been thinking about it. All these weeks watching you navigate your life. The systems you have to deal with, healthcare, childcare, wage theft, scheduling apps that change your shifts without notice. There's technology that could make all of that easier, but nobody's building it because there's no money in it. Nobody gets rich making life easier for warehouse workers and single parents. So you'd get not rich instead? Maybe. Or maybe there's a way to do both. Build something sustainable that actually helps the people who need it most." She pulled her legs up under her on the couch. "I don't have it figured out yet, but I've been talking to Mrs. Chen, to people in the building, even to some of the other parents at Lily's bus stop, just asking what they struggle with, what would make their lives easier. And there are patterns, problems that technology could solve if anyone bothered to try." Ethan thought about that, about the scheduling app at work that changed his shifts with 2 hours' notice, about the healthcare portal that was impossible to navigate, about the childcare crisis that left working parents scrambling and broke. "You'd really walk away from Vanguard?" he asked. "Even if you win?" "I might not have a choice. Marcus has been running it for 6 weeks. Even if the court reinstates me, the damage is done. Board members who voted against me, employees who believed his lies, clients who pulled their contracts. I could spend years trying to rebuild what was, or I could spend that time building what should be." "And you'd do that here in Chicago?" Isabella looked at him, and something in her expression made his chest tight. "Where else would I go? My life is here now. Lily, Mrs. Chen, this apartment with its terrible plumbing and excellent neighbors, you." The word hung between them, you. Not the generic you of casual conversation, but the specific you that meant something different. Ethan should have said something, should have acknowledged the weight of that word, the shift it represented. But his mouth had gone dry and his brain had stopped working, so instead he just sat there like an idiot while Isabella's cheeks went pink. "I mean," she started. "I know what you mean," Ethan said quietly. "And yeah, you should stay." "Yeah?" "Yeah." They sat there on the terrible couch in the too small apartment, not touching, barely looking at each other, while something that had been building for 6 weeks finally became real. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't some movie moment with swelling music and perfect lighting. It was just two people who'd found each other in the worst circumstances and decided that maybe, possibly, this thing between them was worth keeping. "I should go to bed," Isabella said finally. "Tomorrow's going to be intense." "Yeah, me too." Neither of them moved. "Ethan?" "Yeah?" "Thank you for everything, for picking me up that night, for letting me stay, for not treating me like I was broken or crazy or," her voice caught, "for seeing me, really seeing me. Not the CEO, not the failure, just me. You're easy to see, Isabella. You're kind of impossible to miss. She smiled, and it was the most genuine thing he'd ever seen on her face. Then she stood, squeezed his shoulder once, and disappeared down the hallway to his bedroom, which had somehow become her bedroom over the past 6 weeks, while he'd made peace with the lumpy couch. Ethan sat there in the dark for a long time, listening to the building settle around him. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and FBI agents and the beginning of the fight that would determine Isabella's future. But tonight, in this small moment, things felt almost simple. The next morning started with chaos. David called at 6 a.m., which meant Ethan overslept and Lily missed the bus. Isabella offered to walk her to school, which turned into a whole production because Lily insisted on showing Isabella her classroom and introducing her to Mrs. Patterson, her teacher, who looked at Isabella like she was trying to place her from somewhere. By the time Isabella made it back to the apartment, there were 2 messages from David, 3 from the forensic accountant, and 1 from a number she didn't recognize that turned out to be a reporter from the Tribune asking for comment on allegations of financial fraud at Vanguard Technologies. "It's starting," Isabella told Ethan when he called during his morning break. "David filed the motions an hour ago. The story's already leaking. You okay? Ask me in 12 hours. By noon, it had hit every major news outlet. The headlines varied, some careful and measured, others salacious and damning, but they all told the same basic story. Former CEO Isabella Hart was accusing current CEO Marcus Delacroix of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Federal investigators were reviewing evidence. Court documents had been filed. The corporate world was watching. Marcus responded within 3 hours. A press conference, carefully staged, where he expressed disappointment and concern about Ms. Hart's continued inability to accept responsibility for her actions. He called the accusations baseless, desperate, and defamatory. He promised Vanguard would cooperate fully with any investigation while continuing to serve their clients with integrity and transparency. Isabella watched the press conference on Mrs. Chen's TV, the older woman sitting beside her with a running commentary about Marcus's tie being too tight and his smile looking like a shark's. "He's lying," Mrs. Chen said matter-of-factly. "You can always tell when they're lying. The smile doesn't reach the eyes." "You should work for the FBI," Isabella said. "I'm too old for that nonsense, but I know a liar when I see one." Mrs. Chen patted her hand. "You're going to beat him, honey. I can feel it." Isabella wanted to believe that, but watching Marcus perform for the cameras, seeing how easily he controlled the narrative, she felt the old fear creeping back. What if the evidence wasn't enough? What if his lawyers were better? What if she'd risked everything for a fight she couldn't win? Her phone rang. Unknown number again, but this time she answered. "Ms. Hart, this is Special Agent Sarah Martinez with the FBI. I'd like to meet with you this afternoon to discuss the evidence your attorney provided. Would 3 o'clock work?" Isabella's mouth went dry. "Yes, that works." "Good. I'll text you the address. And Ms. Hart, thank you for coming forward. Cases like this don't usually come with such well-documented evidence. You've made our job significantly easier." After she hung up, Isabella sat there holding the phone while Mrs. Chen watched her expectantly. "FBI wants to meet," Isabella said, "this afternoon." "Then you better figure out what to wear." Can't meet the FBI in Ethan's sweatpants. Which is how Isabella ended up at a thrift store on Ashland Avenue, Mrs. Chen in tow, sorting through racks of donated professional wear. She found a suit that almost fit, gray, conservative, only slightly dated, and a blouse that didn't have any stains. Mrs. Chen talked the cashier down to $15 for the whole outfit, then insisted on stopping for coffee on the way back because you need to be sharp for the FBI, not caffeinated from gas station coffee. The FBI field office was downtown, all concrete and security checkpoints. Isabella showed her ID, her driver's license, since her company badge had been taken, and was escorted to a conference room where Special Agent Martinez waited with another agent and enough paperwork to build a small fort. The meeting lasted 2 hours. Isabella walked them through everything: the initial investigation, the account irregularities, Marcus's takeover, the evidence on Melissa's thumb drive. She answered questions about transaction dates and authorization codes and corporate structure. She provided names of potential witnesses and detailed Marcus's pattern of behavior across multiple companies. Agent Martinez took notes on a laptop while her partner, Agent Foster, studied Isabella with an expression that revealed nothing. "Ms. Hart," Foster said when they'd covered the basics, "I need to ask you something directly. Is there any possibility that you were involved in the financial irregularities at Vanguard? Any transactions you authorized that might appear questionable under scrutiny?" Isabella had been expecting this. David had warned her they'd ask. "No. Every questionable transaction happened without my knowledge or was authorized using my codes while I was verifiably elsewhere. The forensic accountant's report documents that." "And you had no business relationship with any of the shell companies in question?" "None. I didn't know they existed until I started investigating the irregularities myself." Foster nodded slowly. "Here's our problem. Marcus Delacroix has resources, connections, and some of the best defense attorneys in the country. He's going to claim you're making these accusations to cover your own misconduct. He's going to paint you as bitter, unstable, and vindictive. We need your case to be absolutely airtight before we move forward with charges." "What does that mean?" "It means we investigate. Thoroughly. We'll subpoena records, interview witnesses, trace every dollar. We'll build a case that can survive the best defense money can buy. But it takes time." "How much time?" "Months, maybe longer." Martinez leaned forward. "I know that's not what you want to hear, but rushing this just gives Delacroix's lawyers ammunition. We do this right, or we risk losing everything in court." Isabella felt something sink in her chest. More waiting, more uncertainty, more of her life suspended in legal limbo while Marcus continued running her company and destroying her reputation. "I understand," she said, because what else was there to say? After the meeting, she walked back to the L station in the gray March afternoon. The city moved around her, people rushing to meetings, grabbing lunch, living their lives like the world wasn't ending. Isabella pulled out her phone, then put it away again. She didn't want to call David or Ethan or anyone else who would try to spin this as good news when it felt like another delay, another obstacle. Instead, she walked. Through the loop, past the plaza where Ethan had found her 6 weeks ago. Someone had put up new planters for spring, flowers that hadn't bloomed yet but promised color eventually. Isabella stood there for a long moment, remembering the cold and the fear and the absolute certainty that her life was over. It hadn't been over. It had just been changing. Her phone buzzed. Text from Ethan. "How'd it go?" She typed back. "FBI is investigating. Could take months. Everything's still uncertain." 3 dots appeared, then, "Want me to come home early?" Isabella stared at those words. Come home. Like the apartment was her home, too. Like she belonged there. "No," she typed. "Stay at work. I'll see you tonight." But she didn't want to go back to the apartment yet. Didn't want to sit in that small space with her thoughts and her fears and Mrs. Chen's well-meaning concern. So she kept walking, down State Street, through neighborhoods that shifted from corporate to commercial to residential. She watched the city transition, saw how the buildings changed, how the people changed, how the whole character of Chicago revealed itself in layers. She ended up at Lily's school just as dismissal started, stood outside the fence with the other parents and caregivers, waiting. When Lily emerged, she spotted Isabella immediately and ran over, backpack bouncing. "You came to get me. Is that okay?" "It's great. Madison's mom is here too, and I can introduce you." Lily grabbed her hand, pulled her toward a woman in scrubs who was checking her phone. "Madison, this is Isabella. She lives with us now." Madison, a girl Lily's age with braids and a gap-toothed smile, waved. Her mother looked up, took in Isabella's thrift store suit and uncertain expression, and smiled. "Hi, I'm Keisha. Madison talks about Lily constantly." Isabella, "I'm staying with Lily and her dad." "Temporarily." "Uh-huh. Temporarily." Keisha's smile suggested she didn't believe that for a second. "Well, the girls have been wanting a play date. You free Saturday afternoon?" Isabella had no idea what she was doing Saturday, had no idea what she was doing with any part of her life, but Lily was looking up at her with such hope that she heard herself say, "Sure, Saturday works." They exchanged numbers. Isabella gave Mrs. Chen, since she still didn't have a working phone of her own, and made plans. As they walked home, Lily chattered about Madison and school and the field trip next month that needed permission slips signed. "Can you sign my permission slip?" Lily asked. Since Daddy's at work? I'm not your parent, Bug. That needs to be your dad. But you're kind of like a parent. You make me breakfast and help with homework and tell me to brush my teeth. Isabella's throat went tight. I'm your friend. Your dad's the parent. Can't you be both? They walked the last 2 blocks in silence, Lily's small hand in Isabella's. When they reached the building, Mrs. Chen was waiting on the stoop again, wrapped in her ancient coat. FBI call? She asked. Not yet. They're investigating. It'll take time. Everything good takes time. Mrs. Chen stood with some difficulty, her knees protesting. Come on, I made dumplings. You both look like you need dumplings. And just like that, Isabella's uncertain afternoon shifted into something warmer. They ate dumplings in Mrs. Chen's crowded living room while she told stories about the building's history. The couple on the 3rd floor who'd been married for 60 years, the young man on the 1st floor who was studying to be a veterinarian, the various dramas and joys that played out in this small corner of Chicago. Lily fell asleep on Mrs. Chen's couch around 7, worn out from school and dumplings and excitement. Isabella carried her back to the apartment, tucked her into bed, and was sitting on the couch trying to decide what to do with herself when Ethan came home. He looked exhausted, his work clothes dusty, but his face lit up when he saw her. Hey. FBI meeting went okay? They're investigating. It'll take months. Marcus has good lawyers and they want an airtight case. She pulled her knees up to her chest. I'm trying to be patient. I'm really bad at being patient. Ethan sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. You picked up Lily from school. Yeah. Ended up making plans with another mom for a play date Saturday. Is that okay? I probably should have checked with you first, but Lily looks so hopeful and… Isabella, it's fine. It's great. He was quiet for a moment. You know you're not temporary, right? I know we keep saying you're staying here temporarily, but you know that's not actually what's happening. What is happening? You're becoming part of this, part of our life. Lily's already halfway to asking if you're going to be here forever, and honestly, He stopped, started again. I don't want you to leave. Even after the case is settled, even after you get your life back, I don't want you to leave. Isabella turned to look at him, really look at him. At this man who'd picked her up in a snowstorm and given her his coat and his couch, and apparently his whole life. Who'd driven her to Evanston and made space for her in his daughter's world and never once made her feel like she was an imposition or a burden. I don't want to leave, she said quietly. I'm terrified of not leaving because that means this is real, and real things can be lost. But I don't want to leave. Then don't. It's not that simple. The case could go either way. If I lose, if Marcus wins, I'll have legal bills and no income, and then you'll figure it out. We'll figure it out, together. Ethan reached over, took her hand. His palm was calloused from warehouse work, warm and solid and real. I'm not saying it'll be easy. I'm saying it'll be worth it. Isabella looked down at their joined hands. 6 weeks ago, she'd had $1 billion company and an empty penthouse and a life built on ambition and isolation. Now she had a lumpy couch and a crappy apartment and a borrowed phone and a 6-year-old who wanted her to sign permission slips. And somehow, impossibly, this felt like more. Okay, she said. Okay, I'll stay. Ethan's smile was slow and genuine and transformed his whole face. Yeah? Yeah. They sat there on the couch, holding hands like teenagers, while the radiator clanked and the city hummed beyond the windows. It wasn't perfect. The case still loomed, the uncertainty remained, and Isabella still didn't know what her future looked like beyond this moment. But for the first time since that cold night in the plaza, she felt like maybe she didn't need to know. Maybe it was enough to be here, in this small space, with these people who'd somehow become her people. Maybe this was what building something real actually looked like. Not billion-dollar valuations and board meetings and press coverage, but dumplings with neighbors and school pickups and someone's hand in yours while you figured out what came next. The FBI investigation moved forward with bureaucratic slowness. Weeks became months. Spring arrived, bringing rain and warmer temperatures. Isabella's gray suit got replaced by other thrift store finds. She got a phone, nothing fancy, but functional. Started helping Mrs. Chen with building maintenance stuff that their landlord ignored. Became a regular presence at Lily's school, eventually volunteering in the library because she had time and they needed help, and it felt good to be useful in ways that didn't involve quarterly earnings. Marcus fought every subpoena, every deposition, every attempt to access Vanguard's records. His lawyers were as good as advertised, but the FBI was patient, methodical, relentless. They traced money through shell companies, interviewed former employees, built a case one piece at a time. And in that space between accusation and resolution, Isabella built something else. Not a company, not a career, but a life. A real one. The call came on a Tuesday morning in November, 11 months after that frozen night in the plaza. Isabella was making breakfast, actually making it, not burning it, when her phone rang. David Chen's name lit up the screen, and something about the early hour made her hands go still on the spatula. "They're arresting him today," David said without preamble. "Marcus Delacroix. FBI has enough evidence for federal charges, wire fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy. They're executing the warrant at 9 a.m. Isabella sat down hard on one of the mismatched kitchen chairs. Today. And there's more. The other CEOs he targeted, we found 2 more, by the way, 5 total, including you. They're all filing civil suits. With Marcus facing criminal charges, the board is reconvening to discuss leadership changes at Vanguard. Your reinstatement is on the table." My reinstatement. The words felt foreign in her mouth. Vanguard. Her company. The thing she'd lost and mourned and, somewhere in the past 11 months, stopped desperately needing back. The vote is scheduled for next Monday. Based on preliminary conversations, it's looking favorable. Several board members have expressed regret about their previous vote. They're calling it acting on incomplete information. David's tone suggested what he thought of that particular euphemism. "Isabella, you're going to win. You're actually going to win." After she hung up, Isabella sat in the quiet kitchen while the eggs she'd been cooking went cold in the pan. Through the walls, she could hear Mrs. Chen's television, the morning game shows the older woman never missed. Down the hall, Lily was still asleep, tired from a late night finishing a book report. Ethan had left for an early shift an hour ago, kissing Isabella's forehead on his way out in a gesture that had become so natural she barely registered it anymore. This apartment, this life, this small, imperfect, beautiful thing she'd built from the ruins of everything else. She pulled out her phone, called Ethan. "Hey," he answered, and she could hear the warehouse noise behind him. "Everything okay? They're arresting Marcus today. David says the board wants to reinstate me. There's a vote Monday." Silence. Then, "That's what you wanted. That's what we've been fighting for." "I know. You don't sound happy." "I don't know what I sound like." Isabella rubbed her face. "Can we talk tonight? After Lily goes to bed?" "Yeah, of course. Hey, Isabella." "Yeah?" "Whatever you decide, whatever you want to do, I'm with you. You know that, right?" "I know. I love—" She stopped herself. They hadn't said those words yet, had been dancing around them for months. "I'll see you tonight." She hung up before she could hear his response, before she could finish that sentence and change everything. The news broke at 10 a.m. Isabella watched it on her laptop, the one she'd finally bought after getting a part-time job doing remote consulting for a small nonprofit. The footage showed Marcus being walked out of the Vanguard building in handcuffs, federal agents on either side. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his perfect hair disheveled. He kept his head down, said nothing to the reporters shouting questions. Isabella felt nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction, no vindication. Just a distant sort of acknowledgement that this chapter was finally closing. Mrs. Chen came over around noon with soup and opinions. "Good," she said, setting down the container with emphasis. "That man had a snake's face. I said so from the beginning. You saw him for 30 seconds on TV. 30 seconds is all you need. Some people you just know." Mrs. Chen settled into her usual spot on the couch. "So, they want to give you back your company. They want to discuss it. And what do you want?" Isabella had been asking herself that question all morning. "I don't know. 11 months ago, I would have done anything to get Vanguard back. Would have fought and clawed and destroyed anyone in my way. But now you have a life that doesn't need a billion-dollar company in it. Is that crazy? To walk away from something I spent 12 years building? Honey, you already walked away. You've been walking away for months, building something different, The only question is whether you want to walk back. Mrs. Chen poured soup into bowls, handed one to Isabella. What does your heart tell you? Isabella thought about that, about board meetings and quarterly earnings and the endless performance of being CEO, about the pressure and the isolation and the way success had felt like armor she couldn't take off. Then she thought about Lily's parent-teacher conferences and Mrs. Chen's building repair projects and the small nonprofit where her consulting work actually helped real people with real problems. I think my heart is telling me I already have what I need. Then there's your answer. But it wasn't that simple. It never was. Lily came home from school with a project about careers, asking Isabella about being a CEO because Madison had told everyone that Isabella used to run a famous company. Ethan came home late, exhausted from a double shift, and fell asleep on the couch before they could have the conversation Isabella had been rehearsing all day. The laptop sat open on the kitchen table, news articles about Marcus's arrest, and Vanguard's crisis cycling endlessly. Isabella lay awake in bed that night, Ethan's bed, which had become their bed somewhere around month 6, and tried to figure out what the right choice looked like. Take back Vanguard and fight to rebuild it into something better, or walk away and build something new from scratch? The answer crystallized at 2 a.m., the way answers sometimes do in the silent hours when you're too tired to lie to yourself. She wanted both, and maybe, for the first time in her life, she could actually have both. The next morning, Isabella called David. I want to propose a deal to the board, she said. I'll come back as CEO, but only under specific conditions. I want complete restructuring authority. I want Marcus's enablers removed. I want an independent ethics board with real power. And I want the company to commit 20% of annual profits to a new division focused on developing technology for working-class communities. Non-negotiable. David was quiet for a moment. That's going to be a tough sell. 20% is significant. Then they can find another CEO. I'm not coming back just to play the same game that let Marcus steal $40 million and nearly destroy everything. If I'm doing this, we're doing it right. Okay, I'll draft the proposal. But Isabella, you need to be prepared for them to say no. The board might decide you're asking for too much. Then I walk away with a clear conscience. Either way, I win. The board met on Monday as scheduled. Isabella wasn't there. David represented her while she sat in the apartment with Lily, helping with homework and pretending her entire future wasn't being decided in a conference room downtown. Ethan had taken the day off, sat beside her on the couch, his presence steady and grounding. When the phone finally rang at 4 p.m., Isabella's hand shook as she answered. They accepted your terms, David said. All of them. You're officially reinstated as CEO, effective immediately, with full authority to restructure as you see fit. The 20% profit allocation passed 8-2. You won, Isabella, completely. Isabella closed her eyes, felt Ethan's hand find hers. Okay, thank you, David. I'll be in touch about next steps. After she hung up, she sat there holding Ethan's hand while Lily worked on her math problems at the table, oblivious to the seismic shift that had just occurred. So, Ethan said finally, you're going back. I'm going back, but not to what it was, to what it could be. She turned to face him. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Always. Can you live with this? With me being CEO again, with the hours and the pressure and all the complications that come with it? Because I meant what I said. I'm not leaving. I'm not walking away from this. She gestured around the apartment, at Lily, at him. But I need to know if you can handle me trying to do both. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. You remember that night I brought you here? When you were half frozen and holding those papers like they were the only thing keeping you alive? Yeah. I didn't bring you here because I thought you were helpless. I brought you here because you were fighting so hard even when you'd lost everything. That fight, that determination, that absolute refusal to quit, that's who you are. And yeah, it's going to be complicated and messy, and sometimes I'm going to miss you when you're in back-to-back meetings until midnight. But I'd rather have complicated and messy with you than simple and empty without you. Isabella felt her throat close up. I was trying to tell you this morning, on the phone. I love you. I'm in love with you, and I'm terrified that this is going to screw everything up, but I love you anyway. Good. Ethan pulled her closer, kissed her temple. Because I love you too. Have for months. Was just waiting for you to figure it out. I'm supposed to be the smart one. You are smart. You're just slow about feelings. Lily looked up from her math. Are you guys being gross? Little bit, Ethan admitted. Okay. Just warning you, Madison says when grown-ups are gross, it means they're getting married. Are you getting married? Isabella and Ethan looked at each other. They'd been living together for nearly a year, had built a life together, had already discussed things like school enrollment and emergency contacts and who Lily should live with if something happened to Ethan, conversations that felt more permanent than any marriage certificate. But they hadn't talked about making it official, hadn't put words to the thing that had been growing between them. Maybe someday, Isabella said carefully, if your dad wants to. I want to, Ethan said immediately. Not because of the company or the money or any of that, because I want Lily to have what I had growing up, two parents who chose to be together, because I want to wake up next to you for the rest of my life, because you make terrible eggs and help with homework and somehow made Mrs. Chen like you more than she likes me, and I don't want to do any of this without you. That's the least romantic proposal I've ever heard, Isabella said, but she was smiling through tears. It's not a proposal. Proposals need rings and planning and probably some kind of speech that doesn't mention eggs. Ethan wiped her tears with his thumb. But when I do propose, the answer's going to be yes, right? Yeah. The answer's going to be yes. Lily threw her pencil in the air. I'm going to be a flower girl. Madison's going to be so jealous. They spent the rest of the evening planning a wedding that hadn't been officially proposed yet, while Lily drew increasingly elaborate flower girl dress designs. It was chaotic and imperfect, and exactly the kind of scene Isabella would have found incomprehensible a year ago. Now it just felt like home. The next 3 weeks were a blur of activity. Isabella returned to Vanguard and immediately began the promised restructuring. She fired 3 board members who'd been complicit in Marcus's scheme, brought in independent auditors, established the ethics board with real investigative power, and she started building the new division, tentatively called Vanguard Community Solutions, focused on developing technology for working-class communities. The work was brutal. 16-hour days, endless meetings, constant pushback from people who preferred the old way of doing things. But Isabella had something she hadn't had before. Every night, no matter how late, she came home to the apartment on the south side. To Lily's homework and Ethan's terrible jokes and Mrs. Chen stopping by with food and gossip. To a life that existed independent of her success or failure at work. It made her better at the job, less afraid of losing it, more willing to make the hard calls because her identity wasn't wrapped up in being CEO anymore. She was also Lily's almost stepmom and Ethan's partner and Mrs. Chen's favorite person to complain to about the building's broken radiators. Marcus's trial was scheduled for the following spring. David predicted a guilty verdict and significant prison time. The civil suits from the other CEOs were also moving forward, though they would likely take years to fully resolve. Vanguard's stock price had taken a hit from the scandal but was recovering as Isabella's reforms became public knowledge. And then, in mid-December, something unexpected happened. One of the warehouse workers from Ethan's distribution center reached out to Isabella through Vanguard's website. His name was James Rodriguez, and he'd heard through Ethan that Isabella was developing technology for working people. He had an idea, an app that would help warehouse workers track their hours, document wage theft, and report safety violations anonymously. Isabella met with him over coffee, listened to his pitch, and realized he'd identified a problem that affected millions of workers nationwide. Within a week, she'd assigned a development team to the project. Within a month, they had a prototype. By February, they were piloting it at 3 distribution centers, including Ethan's. The app caught on faster than anyone expected. Workers loved having a tool that gave them power over their own employment records. Labor organizations started promoting it. Media coverage was overwhelmingly positive, and the data it generated, documenting widespread wage theft and safety violations, sparked federal investigations at several major corporations. Vanguard Community Solutions became profitable within 6 months. Not massively, not enough to satisfy the old guard who still complained about the 20% allocation, but enough to prove the model worked, enough to show that technology built for people instead of profit margins could actually succeed. Isabella hired James as a consultant, then as a full-time employee leading worker-focused development. She hired 3 other warehouse workers from Ethan's center who had ideas about scheduling apps and healthcare navigation tools. She built a team of people who understood the problems they were solving because they'd lived them. And somewhere in all of that, between board meetings and product launches and federal investigations, Ethan actually proposed. It happened on a Saturday morning in March, nothing fancy or elaborate. They were making breakfast, Ethan handling the eggs because Isabella still couldn't be trusted, when he turned to her and said, "Marry me." Isabella looked up from the coffee she was burning. "What?" "Marry me. For real, with a ring and a date and everything." He pulled a small box from his pocket, opened it to reveal a simple silver band with a small stone that caught the morning light. "It's not expensive. I couldn't afford expensive. But it's real, and I'm real, and this thing we've built is real, so marry me." "Yes." The word came out before she'd fully processed the question. "Yes, obviously yes." He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, which meant he'd been planning this for a while, and kissed her while the coffee burned and the eggs went cold, and Lily came running from her room to see what all the noise was about. They got married in May, in the small courtyard behind the apartment building. Mrs. Chen officiated after getting ordained online specifically for the occasion. Lily was the flower girl, wearing a dress she'd designed herself with help from Keisha, Madison's mom. The entire building attended, along with David Chen and his family, some of Isabella's new employees, and a surprising number of people from Ethan's warehouse who'd apparently become invested in what they called the boss's weird love story. Isabella wore a dress from an actual store this time, pale blue, because white felt too formal for a courtyard wedding in Chicago. Ethan wore a suit that Lily declared made him look like a movie star, which made him blush and everyone else laugh. During the vows, Isabella promised to love Ethan even when he left his socks everywhere and made terrible dad jokes. Ethan promised to love Isabella even when she turned every conversation into a business plan and still occasionally burned coffee. Lily, acting as unofficial co-officiant, made them both promise to always eat dinner together when possible and never forget to sign permission slips. The reception was potluck, held in Mrs. Chen's apartment because it was the biggest. Someone had brought a karaoke machine, and the building residents took turns performing increasingly off-key versions of love songs from the 70s. Ethan's co-workers started a betting pool on how long before Isabella and Ethan had another kid, which Isabella overheard and pretended to be offended by while secretly thinking that maybe, eventually, it wasn't the worst idea. That night, after everyone had gone home and Lily had finally crashed from sugar and excitement, Isabella and Ethan sat on their building's roof watching the Chicago skyline light up against the darkness. They'd snuck up here sometimes over the past year when they needed space and quiet and a reminder that the city was bigger than their individual problems. "So," Ethan said, arm around her shoulders, "how's it feel to be Mrs. Cole?" "Dr. Hart Cole, actually. I'm keeping my name professionally. Hyphenating personally." She leaned into him, comfortable and warm despite the cool night air. "And it feels good. Really good. Also terrifying, but mostly good." What's terrifying about it?" "All of it. Being responsible for another human, being part of a family again. Having things I could lose." She looked at him. "I spent so many years building walls, making sure nothing could hurt me because I'd already lost the people who mattered most. And then you came along and bulldozed all those walls, and now I'm out here completely exposed with no defenses. You have defenses. They're just different now. You have me and Lily and Mrs. Chen in this whole weird building full of people who care about you. That's better than walls." "Is it though? Walls can't leave. Walls can't die in car accidents or get cancer or—" Her voice caught. "Isabella." Ethan turned to face her fully. "You're going to lose me someday. I'm going to lose you someday. That's how life works. But spending the time we have together building walls and staying safe, that's not living. That's just waiting to die. That's dark." "Yeah, well, single dad whose wife died of cancer. I've had time to think about mortality." His smile was sad but genuine. "Sarah made me promise before she died that I wouldn't stop living just because she was gone. That I'd find someone else, let Lily have a full family, keep moving forward. I fought her on it because how do you promise to love someone else when the person you love is dying right in front of you? But she said love isn't finite. You don't run out. You just find more." Isabella had heard about Sarah's death, had heard pieces of this story over the months, but hearing it now on their wedding night, with her new ring catching starlight, it hit differently. "I wish I could have met her," Isabella said. "I think we would have either been great friends or hated each other. Probably both. She had strong opinions and no filter. You would have driven each other crazy." Ethan pulled Isabella closer. "But she would have liked that you make Lily laugh, that you show up to school events and help with homework, and don't try to replace her, but also don't act like she never existed. That's the balance Sarah wanted for Lily, someone who loved her without erasing her mom." "I don't know if I'm doing that right." "You are. Trust me." He kissed her forehead. "And for what it's worth, I think she'd approve of you bulldozing my walls, too. I built just as many as you did, just for different reasons. You made me remember that life is for living, not just surviving." They sat there on the roof until the cold drove them back inside, to the apartment that was somehow both too small and exactly the right size, where Lily was still asleep in her room surrounded by her drawings and her rocks and her elaborate dreams about flower girl dresses. Isabella changed out of her wedding dress into Ethan's old sweatshirt, the same one she'd borrowed that first week, and crawled into bed beside her husband. The word still felt strange and new and perfect. Husband, family, home. The next few months settled into a new normal. Isabella split her time between Vanguard's downtown office and remote work from the apartment. Ethan kept his warehouse job because it provided stability and benefits, and because, as he put it, someone needed to beta test Isabella's worker apps from the inside. Lily finished first grade with excellent grades and a concerning obsession with collecting bugs in jars. Vanguard Community Solutions continued to grow. The worker app expanded to include gig economy protections and freelancer contract support. They developed a healthcare navigation tool that helped people understand their insurance options and fight denied claims. A tenant rights app that connected renters with legal resources and documented housing violations. Each project started from real problems identified by real people, built by teams that included those people. The division wasn't as profitable as Vanguard's traditional enterprise solutions, but it was changing lives in measurable ways. Isabella got letters from warehouse workers who'd recovered stolen wages, from freelancers who'd escaped exploitative contracts, from families who'd gotten critical medical care because the navigation tool helped them understand their coverage. Those letters meant more than any quarterly earnings report ever had. Marcus Delacroix was convicted in August. Wire fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, and a dozen other charges. 30 years in federal prison. The civil suits resulted in additional settlements that bankrupted him completely. The other CEOs he'd targeted got varying levels of restitution, though nothing could fully restore what they'd lost. Isabella felt nothing but tired relief when she heard the verdict. Marcus had taken enough of her energy. She wasn't going to give him any more. By the time winter came around again, a full year since that frozen night in the plaza, Isabella stood in front of the Vanguard building holding an envelope. Inside was her resignation letter, not from the company, but from the CEO position. She'd found her replacement, a woman named Sarah Chen, who had David's integrity and Isabella's drive, but none of their baggage. Someone who could run the traditional enterprise side while Isabella focused entirely on community solutions. The board had fought it at first, but Isabella had leverage now. The success of community solutions, the positive press. The proof that ethical business could be profitable business. They'd agreed to her terms. Let her step back from day-to-day operations and focus on the work that actually mattered to her. She walked into the building one last time as CEO, held her final board meeting, handed over responsibilities with the same precision she'd once used to build the company. And then she walked out with nothing but her laptop and the knowledge that she'd left Vanguard better than she'd found it. Ethan was waiting outside in Tommy's borrowed Civic. They still didn't own a car, but Tommy had decided they were reliable customers. Lily was in the back seat, working on homework that wasn't due until next week because she'd inherited Isabella's overachiever tendencies. "How'd it go?" Ethan asked as Isabella climbed in. "It's done. I'm officially just the director of community solutions now. No more board meetings, no more quarterly earnings calls, no more corporate performance art." "How's it feel?" Isabella thought about it as Ethan pulled into traffic, navigating the familiar route back to the south side. About everything she'd lost and found and chosen to let go. About the woman she'd been a year ago, kneeling in the snow with scattered papers, convinced her life was over. About the woman she was now, sitting in a borrowed car with her family, heading home to the apartment that cost too much, and had terrible plumbing, and somehow contained everything that actually mattered. "It feels right," she said finally. "It feels like I finally figured out what I was supposed to be building all along." That night, after Lily was asleep and the apartment was quiet, Isabella and Ethan sat on their couch. The same terrible couch from that first night, though they'd gotten it reupholstered because Mrs. Chen had connections. They drank tea instead of coffee because Isabella had finally admitted that her coffee-making skills were beyond redemption. "What do you want?" Ethan asked, the same question he'd asked a year ago in very different circumstances. "This," Isabella said simply. "I want this. The work that matters, the people I love, the life we've built. I want to watch Lily grow up and see where your weird warehouse app ideas lead and eventually convince Mrs. Chen to let me fix the building's heating system properly. I want boring weeknight dinners and chaotic weekend breakfasts and arguments about whose turn it is to take out the trash." That's really not very ambitious for a former billionaire CEO. "No," Isabella agreed. "It's not. But it's real. And after a year of fighting to get my old life back, I finally figured out I don't want it. I want this one instead." Ethan pulled her close, and they sat there in comfortable silence while the radiator clanked its familiar song and the city hummed beyond their windows. Outside, Chicago moved through another night. Millions of people in their own apartments, building their own lives, fighting their own battles. Inside, in this small space that had somehow become home, Isabella Hart Cole felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the absence of problems or the end of struggle. There would always be work to do, bills to pay, challenges to face, but the bone-deep knowledge that she was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do, with exactly the people she was meant to love. The cold that had nearly killed her a year ago had led her here. To this couch, this apartment, this man, this child, this life she never could have imagined wanting. And when she looked back at that frozen night in the plaza, at the moment when Ethan Cole had made a choice that changed everything, Isabella understood that sometimes the things we lose are just making room for the things we need. She'd lost a company and gained a family, lost a reputation and gained a purpose, lost the person she'd spent years becoming and found the person she'd always been meant to be. And in the end, when everything else was stripped away, that was what remained. Not the billions or the board seats or the press coverage, but the simple, profound truth that the best things in life aren't built in boardrooms or measured in quarterly reports. They're built in small apartments with lumpy couches and borrowed coffee makers, one ordinary day at a time, with people who see you, really see you, and choose to stay anyway. That was worth more than any empire. That was worth everything.